Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another day in my life. So today, kind of like usual, I'm going to be sharing with you all of the yummy food that I made, including making kombucha, which I've never done before and I've wanted to do for forever. Also, we went on our very first field trip with our homeschooling adventure group. We went to a small town in the middle of the mountains and visited a silver mine. It was so cool. Definitely a very memorable experience. Before we hop right in, I want to give a quick shout out to my Patreon. If you haven't checked out my Patreon, I create exclusive content over there talking about all kinds of things. Recently, I talked about what I have learned since becoming a mom because, as you can guess, I've learned a lot. I've also been giving quite a bit of cultural commentary. I've talked about feminism, I've talked about sleep training and homeschooling and all kinds of things. So if you want to check that out, I will link that down below. And with all of that being said, let's hop right in. Okay, we're starting off with the most insanely delicious recipe. This has become like already a favorite meal in my rotation now. Like I can't even describe how much we love this. And this recipe was actually taken from Half-Baked Harvest. I posted this on Instagram and a few of you were like, wait, is this the Half-Baked Harvest recipe? And the answer is yes, and it's so good. So I started off by sauteing up my onions, my peppers, and then I put all of my spices and my garlic and cooked them until they were fragrant. Then I removed my pan from the heat and I threw in my corn, my chicken, my beans, as well as some hatch chilies. Then I put in my cream cheese, my sour cream. By the way, this recipe, like honestly, most times when I make recipes, is not exactly what she had listed, but it's pretty close. And I can't even describe, guys, how amazing this was. So once I mixed everything up, I sprinkled my cheddar cheese that I had shredded on the top. And then I threw the pan in the oven for about 20 minutes, I believe, at like 350. I'm gonna leave the link to her recipe down below. You have to try it. Did I ever even say what it's called? It's called white chicken chili corn dip. Oh my goodness. So while that was baking, I diced up my tomatoes and my onions because I wanted to make some pico de gallo. I have been getting lots of tomatoes recently and peppers from our local farms, and I believe that was the situation on this day. I had a bunch of tomatoes on hand, so I thought, all right, let's make some pico for our dip. I've had this dip now like 3 times, and I have to say, having a fresh pico or even just tomato slices on the side to add to each bite in the dip is really, really good. And it brings a freshness and kind of breaks up the heaviness of the dip. I'm obsessed with the dip. I'm not necessarily calling it heavy, but I mean, sour cream, cream cheese, like it's heavy. So this brings, like I said, that fresh element to it that I really enjoyed. So once I pulled out my white chicken chili corn dip, I topped it with some cut up scallions or green onions and also some cilantro. Oh, and I diced up some avocado too. This is the only time I did the avocado though, because Dan did not really care for the avocado on top, but I thought it was amazing. And yeah, guys, I can't even explain how good this was. Oh, and the corn was from a local farm as well. By the way, these are some of the flowers that we grew in our backyard. I've never grown flowers before, so I've been pretty in awe of how beautiful they are. So apparently these bean bushes like continue to grow, and they'd put off quite a bit of beans. And so I decided to pick them on this day, and then thought I would also show you kind of what's going on with some things that I planted. I want to say for fall, except I'm pretty sure these are all going to die soon. It was kind of just an experiment. So I didn't film it, but in my last video, I did film the recipe for these. And on this day, I had baked up some of these brown butter sourdough discard cookies with candied pecans and pistachios. So good. Can't recommend that recipe enough. Those were cooling, and I decided I wanted to make one of my adrenal cocktails, which actually since this day, my recipe has kind of changed. But you get the gist. So I decided to make a glass for me and a glass for Logan as well. Logan just prefers pure coconut water, but both Dan and I really like doing the mixture of orange juice and coconut water. I think it's so good and it brings the drink over the top. I also like to sprinkle in a little bit of salt sometimes. And recently I actually got this bottle of a product called Trace Mineral Drops. And I've been putting this basically a few drops in all of my drinks lately. And it just makes sure that all of my drinks are full of good minerals. So even though the coconut water already has minerals in it, and so does the orange juice, I've just really been into these drops and kind of putting them in all of my drinks lately. All right, so we decided we wanted salmon tacos on this night. I'm actually trying to up my salmon intake, but I don't like cooking salmon from the freezer unless it's in something else. Like I don't like it by itself unless it's fresh. And so salmon tacos are kind of my go-to. So I started off by measuring out I think it's called masa harina. I think that's what it's called. It's basically like a corn mixture with a little bit of dehydrated lime. And then I measured out my water and I heated up my water on the stovetop once I had measured it out. By the way, side note, for all of you guys that like knowing what channels other people are watching, lately I've been watching this channel called Weird History. It's pretty entertaining. And then Logan's been into something very interesting lately, and it's videos of people playing with Thomas the Train toys. So he checked out that video for a little bit while I mixed up our tortillas. Now, every single time that I make my corn tortillas, I feel like it's not gonna work. Like this is the time they're gonna fall apart. And it's always a little iffy. Like it's definitely been a learning process. But the funny thing is it's like a learning process where I'm not sure exactly what I'm learning, because every time I feel like I'm flying a bit blind and just hoping it works. I will say, get your water pretty warm when you're mixing this, if not hot. A few of you guys had said that to me, that like hot water is actually kind of ideal. I don't know if that's true, but I've definitely been using water on the warmer side of life. And you want to really work the dough together for about a minute or so, because it works together more and more and stops acting like a sticky foam the more you like rub it together. So I separated my dough into 8 pieces and I rolled out my balls. By the way, since this point, I've actually started measuring the weight of my dough balls, because I realize, just like with the cookies and just like with everything else, that if they're all closer to being an even weight, not only do we get like even tortillas, it's just, I don't know. I just think it's easier and more convenient that way. But at this point, I actually ended up getting rid of my parchment paper and switching to a method that you guys had reminded me about, and that is the Ziploc baggie method. And I looked this up on YouTube on how to do this. You just fold the bag up, cut as you can see, and it turns into being my replacement for parchment paper to press down my tortillas. And honestly, just like you guys said, this is way easier than parchment paper. Like, I don't know, something feels weird about using a Ziploc bag, but honestly, it's like 10 times easier to remove the tortilla from the Ziploc baggie than it is to remove it from the parchment paper. I've ruined many tortillas trying to remove them from parchment paper just because they're thin and delicate, and it still honestly takes a little effort from the Ziploc bag. It's just way easier this way. I will say this too, if I haven't said it in any of my recent taco making endeavors on this channel, that making tortillas is like a literal game changer. Honestly, forever with making tacos, Dan and I would be like, what are we gonna put? Like, what tortilla are we gonna use? It never felt quite right or tasted even quite right, even though it was good. It's just like something's missing. Well, happy to report back that it was officially the tortilla that was missing, because making your own tortillas totally changes the taco game, like I said. Then because we're doing another Mexican dish and I just love tomatoes, I decided to cut up another one of my tomatoes that I had picked up from a farm recently and dice it up for some fresh pico. Now I wanted to make some guac, so I chopped up a little bit of green scallions that I had left on hand, as well as some more cilantro, a bunch of lime juice, a little bit of sour cream, of course, a good amount of salt, and then I mashed all of that together. Then it was time to grill up our salmon. I feel like you guys know this, but I love these Siete grain-free tortilla chips. And I just like eating them because the oil is cleaner and then I'm mixing up my grain. It's not just all corn. By the way, we ended up frying up our tortilla shells as well in some avocado oil, and these were amazing. All right, so on this day, I walked the long walk next door to my parents' house, and we had our friend Abigail over to teach us how to make kombucha. Now, I have wanted to make kombucha for like the last few years, and I've just never gotten around to it because it felt very overwhelming, as do honestly a lot of homesteady type things at first. I feel like they just feel really overwhelming, and sometimes having someone hold your hand through the beginning steps really makes a big difference. So Abigail helped us make this, and I will definitely be teaching you guys in the future how I make my kombucha, but I'm one batch in and she was my teacher and I just can't properly explain it to you right now. But that being said, Abigail is definitely like a legit homesteader, unlike me. And she's recently started a YouTube channel and she's been filming videos. She's going to be uploading soon and she has a lot to share and teach. So if you want to check out her channel, I will link her down below. She's like such a sweet soul and so talented. And yeah, so she was explaining everything to us, the difference kind of between the SCOBY and the starter liquid, and you know what we should be looking for as our kombucha ferments, which she kept saying to me, if you can do sourdough, you can do kombucha. This is way easier. Dan and Logie stopped by while we were making kombucha to hang out in the backyard, and they just looked so cute. So I had to show you. I love my boys so much. All right, so on this day, I knew I wanted to make some French fries with our food. So I started off by rinsing my potatoes. Then I put them through my French fry cutter press thing. This thing is awesome. Sometimes, depending on the type of potato, it can be a little hard to slice, but in general, this French fry slicer is amazing. It's saved me so much time now making French fries. After like a year and a half of cutting French fries by hand, I'm like, okay, definitely into French fries and it might be worth investing in one of these. And it definitely was, because it saves a lot of time. So I will try and remember to link that down below if you want to check it out. And then I cut up my artichokes as well because we hadn't had artichokes in a while. Decided we wanted to steam some. So then I threw my potatoes in boiling water to cook up for approximately 7-ish minutes. You don't want to overboil them to where they're going to fall apart when you try to cook them, but you also want to boil them because the softness of the potatoes is part of what lends to them being crispy once you cook them in the oil in the oven, or the way that I do it. So then I put my artichokes in this pot that had been heating up on a little steamer net so that they could steam. And then I feel weird that we're back here doing this again, but it was another day and we needed another adrenal cocktail. So I poured myself my usual orange juice and coconut water, and then I poured Logan a little glass of coconut water. And yes, we do keep our jars from stores and use them as glasses because having little mini glasses like this is convenient. Hashtag classy life. So then once my potatoes had cooked for 7 minutes, I took them out of their water, and then I like to let my potatoes sit for a few minutes before I transfer them to the pan because when they're really, really hot, they're more likely to break. Then I took about 2 tablespoons-ish of tallow and I heated it up in a little pot till it melted down and was like oil again. Lately, I've been cooking my fries in tallow at the recommendation of some different homesteaders that I know, and it's really good and helps me get some more of the saturated fat that I'm trying to get in my diet. So then I sprinkled some garlic powder and a little bit of thyme on my fries, as well as some of this real sea salt. Then I threw my fries in the oven at 425 to bake for about 20 minutes, stirring them halfway and watching them get golden brown. So I had actually diced up a bunch of these veggies earlier in the day and they were waiting for me in the fridge to cook up. So I had those pulled out. By the way, I had to pause and check on my artichokes and they were ready to remove from the heat, which the way that you can tell is if one of the outer leaves easily comes off when you pull it, that typically means they're ready to be taken off the steamer. Then I like to let these cool down for a bit before I cut off the spiky insides. So you can see that at this point, my fries had gotten golden brown, oh so delicious. I took them off the pan and put them in a bowl with a paper towel on it so that I could toss them around, kind of pull off any excess oil, and then I sprinkled them in some more salt while I was like tossing them around the bowl. Then once my artichokes had had a chance to cool, I pulled off the spiky inside parts of the artichoke. Then I put some oil in the pan, I believe that was avocado oil, and I sauteed up all of my vegetables that I had chopped up. Of course, I had to put in some garlic powder. I used to do this all in one pan, but Dan's right. If you cook the sausages in a separate pan, they actually get crispier. So in a separate pan, I was cooking up my chicken sausages from Amalu while I cooked up my veggies in this other pan. And then by the way, in another pot, I was cooking up some balsamic glaze, which just consisted of balsamic and honey that I cooked until it reduced by quite a bit. Then it gets nice and sticky and less watery than just balsamic vinegar. Then it was time to make my garlic aioli. So I poured out some of my homemade mayonnaise that I had made with avocado oil. Then I pressed a good amount of garlic into the mix. I squeezed tons of lemon juice into the mix as well. So when I'm making my garlic aioli, I like tons of black pepper. I think that that's part of just what makes this amazing, and a good amount of salt as well. And I mixed that up. Then once my chicken sausages had had a chance to get a little bit crispy almost, I threw that into the mix with all of my veggies that I had chopped up earlier, which was just bell peppers, mushrooms, and onions. I forgot to mention this, but I ended up putting my artichokes in the broiler on low for a little bit. And once those had gotten a little bit crispy, I took them out of the oven and I drizzled my homemade balsamic glaze all over the top of them. We had a bunch of blueberries on the side because this week we had picked tons of blueberries from a local farm, and that was our dinner, and it was absolutely delicious. All right, so on this morning, we were heading out to our very first field trip with our homeschool adventure group, and it was raining a lot, so I was very grateful. I mean, I was grateful for more than just this reason, but Dan actually came with us on the trip this day, and I was just thinking about how I was glad I didn't have to drive in the rain. So he drove us all the way up to this small town outside of where we live. And I believe it's called Wallace. And this town is famous for their silver mining. I guess apparently at one point, this town had more millionaires than like any other town in the whole US because of the silver mine. Kind of crazy. So we stopped by the park that greets you when you first enter town to have a little bit of lunch with some of the other families before we made our way to the mine. And then guys, I can't even describe how cute this town is. Like, there's legitimately part of me, I told Dan, that in my daydreams, like I could move to an even smaller town. Now, could I? I don't know. But in my daydreaming, in my imagination, I could live in a tiny little town. And I believe that this town only has like 800 residents in it. So we hopped on this trolley that took us through the town and actually up to the top of the mountain where the silver mine was. So once we got up there, anyone who fit into a hard hat had to put on a hard hat, and then we made our way into the mine. Now, I was actually kind of scared to go into the mine beforehand. I felt like I was gonna feel just kind of claustrophobic and nervous the whole time. But I don't know what happened. I don't know if I was just so caught up in filming or the whole thing was just so exciting that I didn't even really think about it. I never felt scared the whole time. It was honestly just really cool and really fun to just be in this totally different setting from my everyday life and hear about how this town, you know, produced silver and made money and mined through this rock to get the silver. So he did a lot of demonstrations. I only got a couple of them because there were a few times where things that he was doing were really loud and he told us to cover our ears. And so I did. I couldn't film. I was busy covering my ears. But we got to see, like I said, a few live demonstrations that were pretty cool to see in action, like how different machinery worked. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be a part of our homeschool adventure group. We've just started for the year and already we've made just really cool memories and met the coolest people. So this was one for the homeschooling books. And then after we toured the mine, they gave us more of a proper tour of the rest of the town. And all of these buildings are like old historic buildings. They actually have some kind of rule set up in town where like nobody's allowed to tear down any of the historic buildings. Or if they do, I guess they supposedly have to build it up to be like architecturally, historically accurate to the time period that they've kind of wanted to freeze in. Also, I got one of these mugs at a thrift store once because I thought they were just beautiful. Turns out they're from this town. So I hope that you guys liked seeing all of this. I was joking with my friend Sarah on Instagram, who I met in Nashville, and she was calling me Nat Geo Nikki. And I like that name. I might have to make that my official side name for all of my adventures in Idaho. It's me, just Nat Geo Nikki. So that's it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel to see all of my future videos. Also, don't forget to check out my Patreon if you're interested in that. And I will, God willing, see you guys back here soon with another new video. Oh, don't forget to let me know if I forget to link something in the info box. So, okay, that's it. Bye, guys.